From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, I'm Rob Cairns. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's podcast, I have Roger Rosweide with me, and we talk about his company that he co-founded, WPCS.io. Sit back, relax, grab a drink, enjoy the show. This podcast is brought to you by Stunning Digital Marketing, the digital marketing agency for all your business needs. We are also your WordPress security experts, having over 14 years of experience locking down, backing up, and protecting WordPress websites. Go to stunningdigitalmarketing.com for more info, or stunningdigitalmarketing.info for links to everywhere we can be found on the web. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. And today I'm here with my guest, Roger Rosweide. Did I get that right, Roger?
Yes, just about.
I'm sorry. It's one of those names that's really tough. And Roger is the co-founder of WPCS.io. How are you today, Roger?
I'm fine. I have to admit, though, it's very hard even for me to pronounce my last name in English. So only if you're a native Dutch speaker will you ever have a chance. So I don't hold you responsible.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So do you want to pronounce it for us so we get it right?
Sure. So my name in Dutch is actually a French name. So it's actually Roger. But I always pronounce myself in English. Also, for some reason, because my Dutch friends always call me Raj, an abbreviation of Roger. So that's my first name. And then the last name is Rosweide, which is, like I said, very hard to pronounce.
There you go. Thank you for the humor and for being so kind this morning. I appreciate that. You know, I've got a partner in my life who's Italian, and I go through the same thing, by the way. So I should tell you that up front in a big way. So
I did my master's in Italy, and at some point I had a girlfriend, an Italian girlfriend, and she was like, "Italian is so easy. All you have to do is pronounce the letters in the alphabet correctly." And I was like, then first you need to know how to pronounce every letter in the alphabet in Italian. You're making it so hard right now. So yeah, I get it completely.
Yeah, we all get it. Thank you for joining me this morning. And today I thought we'd talk about why did you go and create a SaaS product, and tell us about that journey a little bit.
It's a very good question. Why would anyone really want to, start a SaaS? So I think we started at a position where many people in the WordPress scene find themselves initially. We were an agency. And so most of the product company owners or even hosting company owners I speak to at some point started as an agency. They started building websites. Often you start with one for yourself, obviously. And so It's the same thing for us. We weren't actually a web agency initially. We were an agency specializing in advertisements and content. I myself am a content maker by trade. But we noticed at some point that websites were just an easy foot in the door, right? You sell someone a website and then you have a lot of upsells on the back of that. And also additionally, because I just mentioned I did my master's in Italy, and my other co-founder, he's traveled extensively in Vietnam and South America as well. Oh, wow. And we had a lot of friends who always wanted to stay over with us in Amsterdam. And I don't know if you've ever been in an Amsterdam house, but it's very, very small. It's a very old city. And so all the houses that were made at the time are just very small. So obviously you want to be hospitable and invite people to your home, but it gets crowded real fast. So we started developing this app for hotels. We had a lot of friends who owned hotels, and we knew that at some point after 8 usually. The
Mm.
reception goes home and you have a night manager, and they don't really take new reservations. So we started making an app that would auction off empty rooms late at night. And so I got one of my best friends attached to the project, and he's a cloud engineer and a full stack developer. And then we started making more websites simply because that was one of the things that would tie us together. So now we were building a SaaS, and at the same time transitioning our agency from content and marketing to web or to websites. And then the pandemic happened. We were supposed to launch the app on 23rd of March 2020, which is my birthday. And on March 17, the entire world, or at least in the Netherlands, went into lockdown. So it was,
we were in lockdown at that point too. So
yeah, right.
We were already there.
Like we were on the cusp of launching our SaaS, and it became completely redundant in the scope of 24 hours.
Yeah.
But also, the websites that we were building were mostly for gyms and restaurants, because those are the places that we most often frequent. So it was just, one of those things where your agency is very much connected to your personal life, and then your personal life collapses and your agency does the same thing.
Yeah.
So a week later, Wijnand, who has also an almost impronounceable name, who's the developer attached to the SaaS and the agency, he calls me up and he says, "We're probably going to be building more sites, right?" And I say, "Yeah, for sure. Everybody's going online. Websites for us, again, are an easy foot in the door." And he says, "Yeah, I've got an idea to build something that lets us easily spin up new sites and then manage them all as one, develop them centrally, and then do it serverless so that I don't have to worry about hosting." And I was like, "That sounds awesome. That doesn't exist yet?" He's like, "No, not that I can find." And then before we knew it, we actually had attached a couple of agencies who were, had been looking for the same thing over and over for years. And we decided that we were actually going to still launch a SaaS, and fully leave behind the agency world. Even though we are very much still connected to agencies and we facilitate agencies and help them start a SaaS, we ourselves no longer are an agency. And so, yeah, that's our origin story.
That's so interesting. And you mentioned you were connected to the hotel space in your original SaaS. And one of the chains that had a terrible time during the pandemic was Airbnb, right? Their numbers dropped off. Like they almost died to non-existent. And, it's funny. I was looking at them the other day because I'm an avid traveler. I know like weekend getaways in Ontario. I think I was telling you I like to get around this province a little bit. And one of the things I noticed is Airbnb is not even in the price market these days. It's almost cheaper, believe it or not, with all the fees and all the add-ons to go stay in a hotel. If you want to stay in Airbnb, that's a lifestyle issue. That is not a money-saving issue anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's a very astute comment. It truly is. We booked an Airbnb for WordCamp Europe next week, and I noticed the prices are basically similar, but it's like you say, it's a lifestyle thing. Sibren, again, an almost impronounceable name in Dutch, is one of my other co-founders, and me and Wijnand and Sibren are going. And it just so happens to be our favorite way of traveling, because you want to feel like you're in someone's home in another country, like you live there. And a hotel often feels more distance from the reality of the ordinary Greek person in this case.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you don't do it for the money anymore.
Yeah, I would say the only SaaS that, in terms of the hospitality, restaurant, transportation, that's really for the money is Uber. To be frankly, Uber is certainly a money difference if you're going there. I know in the Greater Toronto area, I haven't set foot in a traditional taxi cab in probably 5 years. But what I'll also tell you is some of that's a lifestyle too, because some of the drivers that drive, people think, oh, guys who drive rideshare aren't educated. Wrong. People make these preconceived notions, and it's just so interesting, right?
Yeah, again, fully agree. I think actually you can tell how much you're right by whenever there's a competitor in the market, especially when it comes to Amsterdam. They always start by offering huge discounts, and then everybody transitions to this competitor. And then at some
Yeah.
point, obviously, it's financially unsustainable, so they often die and just go away. And then I think Uber in Amsterdam is still the leading taxi service. But every time a competitor enters the market, they always shift towards the competitor simply because they're cheaper. Nobody's really tied to the brand per se. It's really a money issue in terms of transportation.
In Toronto, it's mostly Uber and Lyft. They're the two big competitors in the rideshare game. It's funny, before Uber came along, I'll share with you. In Toronto, getting a taxi cab plate was such a godsend. Drivers used to spend the money on their plates because they would sell them as their retirement for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And
Mm,
Uber instantly overnight killed that market. They made those plates basically utterly worthless. It's so ironic. It's not funny. Like it's
yeah. I don't
it's
think we have Lyft yet, but I wouldn't really know because as a true Dutch person, I ride my bike virtually everywhere. Even if it's a little too far away, I still try to.
yeah.
I think it's a part of the Dutch pride to be able to go anywhere on a bike. Obviously,
Yeah.
our country lends itself very very well to it. It's so flat. So yeah, I
I,
wouldn't
I
know really.
I'm a walker, and to be fair, in the GTA, we also have a fairly extensive regional transit network. Canada's known for its regional transit and its transit compared to the US. So, like, getting around here is not a problem. So, it just doesn't
Nice.
work. So, let's jump in a little more into your SaaS. So, you decide to create a SaaS. You talked about your origin story. Where did you go from there?
So again, initially we thought we were building a tool for ourselves, but that didn't last long. Very soon we found out that it was something but a lot of people were looking for, and we didn't really do much research because again we wanted to build something for ourselves. So the research that we did was geared towards how can we build the coolest solution that we can think of. So very quickly, we decided we were going to use Kubernetes as the way to orchestrate the containers used to spin up sites or to scale sites rather. And then very quickly, we had researched multi-site in the past, and don't get me wrong, because it sometimes comes off as if I go on sort of multi-site rant. I'm fond of multi-site. I think it's great, but for the proper use case. And the
Yeah.
use case that we were after at the moment, because now it has expanded significantly, but at the moment we were looking for a website as a service, right? We were interested in selling people an individualized website that is a total solution. But I've actually recently only learned a new term, credits to Marieke van der Rakt, the wife of Joost de Valk from Joost, and she dubbed it the digital experience platform. I had never heard of that.
Nor
It
have I.
just Yeah, it just goes to show how little research we really did in terms of competition or whether or not this solution already existed. We just wanted to build something that would suit our needs. So again, it would be you spin up a site that is virtually completely done. The customer can customize based on the template that you provide, and every time you want to update or maintain or upgrade the sites, plural, you obviously don't want to go into them individually. You want to centralize, so really in a Git like fashion. So that's what we wanted to do, and then we started looking at SaaS companies. So how do they scale? How does Airbnb or how does Uber really get as big technically? And so very quickly we learned that we had to introduce multi-tenancy to WordPress, and I used the verb introduce, but at the time we had no idea that it wasn't introduced yet. So we built a cloud platform that spins up multi-tenant websites. So basically, you have a version that you develop, and the version becomes the template that you use, or rather, you create a version and then you create a template based on that version, and the template you use to spin up new sites. And then every time you want to improve on your product, you create a new version. So that new version then becomes the version 2, as it were. So you have your version management system. From that new version, you create a new template, and then you can spin up new sites. But if you transfer the old websites, we call them tenants, from the older version to the new version, then you automatically upgrade your existing sites because they receive all the new code changes that you've done. So that's what we built for ourselves. And so we knew we didn't want to do something with multi-site because you were unable to do any of that, because what I've just explained really is DevOps, which is also another thing that's virtually not existent in WordPress. Like only if you use something with Git, then you know DevOps, but most agencies don't. And we wanted to do something that is completely scalable, completely safe. You can continuously update your sites without breaking them, or if you do break them, being able to restore them quickly and safely. So just thinking out all those features really quickly led us into conversations with other agency owners that we knew just to get feedback. And that's when we realized, hey, this is much bigger than us.
No, I agree.
So at some point we realized also that we were too small to build the entire platform, which is when we approached one of our best friends, Dexter. I've known him since kindergarten, and he had been a cloud engineer at a company for the past 12 years, which is a very long time these days to be working at a single company. And we just wanted some advice from him. And as it turned out, he actually had been planning to leave the company, or he was looking for a new challenge for quite a while. And so now suddenly we are 4 founders, but we are 4 founders of an agency that pretty much just collapsed due to the pandemic. And this guy is too expensive. He's got another life really. So that's when we that's when we knew we had to go the venture route. We had to do the whole startup thing. So my best friends suddenly became co-founders. And we did the whole venture building program, and we turned into a startup. And that's been a really fun but very roller coaster ride.
No, I'm sure. I don't know if you know. I was going to share with you before we went to record. Toronto is one of those big startup cities in North America. I don't know if you know that or not, but if you get downtown, there's communities of startup upon startup, and it sounds like you've looked at things differently than the traditional startup. Like you've done a little bit more homework. You've done a little bit more in tune of what the market is doing, instead of just launching and saying, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think so. I actually did know Toronto is the startup capital of Canada. So Wijnand actually has a girlfriend in Vancouver. And
Okay.
so he goes there every 2 months, and we were like, oh, that's great. So many startups. He's like, nope, those are in Toronto. So so when he goes to Canada, it's nice and quiet, as opposed to if you were in Toronto. But
he can come by the way.
I'll be sure to send him over. I think we did things differently than most WordPress companies. Traditionally, the venture route, the VC route, is not well traveled. But also, I think we did it differently than most, you could say, traditional startups, because we utilize WordPress, which is very uncommon for a startup. Usually, you have your own SaaS build, you have your own tech stack, and we built for the largest open source community, which we very much believe in, the democratizing the internet.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very interesting hybrid of the two cultures coming together.
Yeah, most WordPress companies are different. They start off as individuals. They'll create a plugin, they'll create a theme shop, and then they'll stand there and say, okay, which one of the big hosting companies is going to buy me? I mean, look what's gone on in our sector. Look what Stellar and Liquid Web have done. Stellar's a Liquid Web brand, buying out the events calendar, buying out, iThemes, and that whole stuff. Look what Newfold has done by buying out Yith and Yoast. Yoast, as in the SEO plugin. I mean, look what's going on in that space, and it's going on all the way through our space. That's the aim of most people. And then I know some business founders, and shout out to my good friend Mark Westgard at WS Forums. Strange enough, it just happened to be wearing the shirt today. Mark's created a plugin because, again, like you, he had a need, but he's decided to keep it in-house where he hasn't gone out looking for investors. And that's typically the WordPress way, right? Is build something and then find out who is going to buy me. Like even Brian Gardner over at Studio Press. Studio Press was bought, right, at one time. So you kind of look at the cycle. And you guys have gone about it totally different.
Yeah, true. I got to say, it's I don't think that was too intentional. As opposed to how we because we were building the hotel SaaS and researching the VC landscape. I think that was a model that was very much set in our minds. So I think from the beginning we weren't going to do the traditional WordPress thing, but at the same time, starting to raise capital, we quickly started speaking to hosting companies and to large product companies and investors in the WordPress space. And we learned that if you take money from a WordPress company or investor early on, you might close doors with other companies. And we didn't want to. We wanted to build a platform for everybody and not alienate anybody. And I think at some point you probably have to embrace the fact that you're probably going to, shut some doors along the way. But we were still finding out what the platform was, and for because it's so broad, it's like you can do so much with it that we couldn't even envision all the use cases yet. So that being said, we chose to go for the most agnostic VC that we could find, and then be sure that they wouldn't interfere with our strategy at the time, but also not alienate any other company that wouldn't want to work with us in the future.
It's that juggling act, isn't it, sometimes? And we were talking before we went to record, you just took on some investment. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, actually, I think the segue is a perfect moment in the story, because, like I said, we raised our first round about 2 years ago, which was first with a German VC funded by Porsche, the car, and Axel Springer, which is the largest media firm in, you could say, Europe even.
By the way, my favorite car, for the record.
Mine too. Everybody asks, do we have a Porsche? And I'm like, no. If only. not yet, at least. But for sure. So and the reason we chose them is because they have what they call a venture building program. So most VCs, they try to help you build, revenue, build your business. But what they focused on mostly, they called themselves a very early VC. And instead of focusing on the business itself, they help you find your feet in the startup space. They help you connect to investors. They help you understand the terms of contracts. They help you, understand how to raise capital for what valuation and reserve stocks for your employees and whatnot. They really help you professionalize as a company as you prepare for, becoming a unicorn or whatever. And so after we did that venture building program, we were much more equipped to actually start approaching other investors, which is when we re-engaged a Dutch fund that we had been talking to for a bit. And they were actually the best partner in terms of how to launch the business after, understanding how it actually all works. And because they both were very agnostic, we could easily get in touch with all WordPress companies that we wanted to speak with, possibly partner up with. And that's what we have been doing for the past 2 years, until the moment when we realized who are the players in the WordPress space who are loved, who are neutral, who don't close doors, who everybody knows. And it just so happens that a fellow Dutchman, was already very available to us whenever we needed guidance or ask questions. I could always just approach him on Slack and just send him random stuff. Honestly, sometimes I look back at it and I'm like, how is this guy, taking the time to look at this new idea? And it's Joost. So I'm very, very happy that we were able to formalize that relationship, because the guy is an absolute treasure to the ecosystem, and also a lot of fun to be around, as is his wife, by the way, who I met a bit after. So the reason to choose Joost at that point is because we were more experienced in the ecosystem in general, and we were better equipped to make that decision.
That's an interesting one, and he has such a reputation in the space of being that open guy, being really on top of stuff. So those who don't know him should get to know him, because he didn't get to where he got to by having a closed mind at all. Hey, Roger.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I would be remiss if I didn't say that he has a booth at WordCamp Europe next week, where you can actually pitch your startup to him, and he will tell you on the spot if he will invest. Obviously, depending on, so you'll figure out the terms after, but he will express an interest to invest on the spot. I've actually been told.
Yo's own version of Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, just for fun.
Exactly.
Those two shows, the reference. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that show. Yeah.
Dragon's Den, interestingly, is the Canadian version, and Shark Tank, of course, is the US company, because they didn't want to pay for all the Dragon's Den licensing, right? So,
oh, really?
Yeah, that's
I thought that Dragon's Den is from the UK, actually.
It started in the UK, but there is a Canadian version of it that runs on CBC, which is our national broadcaster, and has run for many, many years, and has had some big investors on. Big investors on the Canadian show is Kevin O'Leary. Those in the US who know him, he's on Shark Tank. He's been on past. Robert Hrvčak, who's originally Croatian. He's on both shows. And then other notables over the years. So yeah, it's Fly's mind here, but you those who watch the shows will get the reference, I'm sure.
So the reason why I think that Joost is actually in a great position to make a sudden decision to invest, and when I say Joost, I actually also mean Marika.
Yes.
She's as brilliant and as important in this duo as they're both equally, but where it's sometimes a little hard to believe that four sharks, instantly understand the industry, the product, that is being pitched in, and all the upsides and downsides and the market potential. I find that hard to believe, but Joost and Marika really know the industry, right? So when you come and you pitch the next Forms plugin, they'll be like, yeah, sure, pass. But they have their own hypotheses of where the WordPress ecosystem is, what it's developing towards, and where the potential and also where the downsides of it are. And they're truly trying to fortify the community. So I think if they're as equipped to make that decision as anyone on the spot. So I think it will prove to be a very interesting booth.
I'm sure it will. So let's now dive into your product a little bit. And one of the things that always concerns me about SaaS products, and I have to tell you, I'm a security guy, so you know where this conversation is going to go very quickly. And I came out of a background where before I got into running my own marketing agency, I did security on enterprise servers. So how does your product sit with security, Roger?
Well, fortunately, I'm not the one to ask. Well, at least I'm not the one to answer that in detail. No. But I have to admit, it is for sure something that every SaaS is often worried about. I can remember a time when we were being bombarded with DDoS attacks, and that was way in the beginning, before we even launched the beta. We just had our first couple hundred sites on the platform, and that was, because you're trying to defend to something that you've never really had before. Obviously, you know about it, but it's not something that you've experienced previously. And as it happens, it was a customer that had their name and logo under every website that they produced. So really, all you have to do is just Google the company and find out that they have a couple hundred sites, and that they also do WooCommerce transactions. So then you start attacking them.
Wonderful.
They just happen to be on our service. So yeah, that was very annoying.
I'm laughing at you, but I'm not laughing with you. I'll share with you one that you might want to hear. Is one of the major domain registers in North America. The Canadian is a company called Hover. You've probably heard of Hover. They're a big player. Well, my mom, for business, hosts her email on Hover and uses them strictly as a mail server. 2 months ago, Hover took such a bad DDoS attack, their primary mail server was offline for 48 hours, if you can believe that, due to a DDoS attack. It was that bad. So, I mean, it's just, I hate to tell people, it's the state of the world we live in. And it's no longer, will you take those attacks? It's how do you deal with them and how do you recover, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I agree. Fortunately, so we are 4 founders, 2 of them commercial, me being one of them, and 2 being technical.
Good.
And so you've got Wijnand, who is, I always call him the dreamer. He's the guy who dreamt up the idea of multi-tenant WordPress and exposing that to the ecosystem as a whole to leverage. But Dexter and Wijnand and I have been friends since kindergarten, the 3 of us. And Dexter is almost the perfectionist to make sure that whatever's being dreamt up is actually sustainable and robust. And he does not take any risk whatsoever. And having worked at a large cloud company for 12 years as a lead developer will teach you how to implement best practices and prepare for ISO certification straight from the beginning. So if we're currently secure, which we are, then the 2 of them together, being able to take risks and at the same time cover your basics is, I think, due to the fact that they're together in this.
By the way, you can use those words on this podcast if you want.
All right, cool. No, but I think they're together in this.
Yeah, I hear you. So moving into product a little bit, what's the typical agency that comes to you and says, we want to buy your product? And how many average instances do they spin up? Like, do you have any sense of what those numbers are, or can you share?
For sure. So on average, I believe we have a metric we call average tenant per customer. So tenant being website, but because you can do much more with a WordPress instance on our platform than build a website, because you can build a SaaS. We call them tenants. And I think the number is 16 or 17, because it recently increased from 14 to 16 or 17.
So that's a big number. When you think of it, your average customer is spinning up 17 instances. That's quite a bit.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, I would say 80% of all customers start with one. Yep. So you've got customers that launch hundreds of sites, and most of those customers have already adopted a product-led mindset. They already sell products and not projects, and so they just start adopting the platform, and then they go about the business as they've had it before, just in a more scalable and robust way. Yeah. But so I would say, so if you ask me the question, like what typical agency approaches us, then 80%, 8 out of 10 times, it is an actual traditional agency. And I don't mean that in a derogative way, the word traditional. I mean, they make websites and they organize themselves in projects, and that was me for the longest time. And it is the most fun, I think, because every project is its own unique, almost piece of art. You get to look at it from a whole and through the eyes of the customer, and that's a lot of fun. but it's also very unscalable. And I often say an agency either has too much work or too many employees, and it truly felt that way, right? It's very hard to prepare for
Oh,
scale.
no question. In my case, it's probably number one. So yeah.
Yeah, right. So if you want to talk about product, then I think you have to talk about scale and scaling a business. And so the agencies that we have signing on, a lot of them are trying to adopt a website as a service, but they don't intend to shift entirely to a website as a service. So what they do is they adopt a method of selling sites automatically that are standardized, and that sometimes the customer can start customizing themselves, or they still have this sort of onboarding experience where they help you customize the site for the customer. And then at some point, some customers they have enough. They want a standardized site because it's optimized for a certain niche, or it's optimized for a certain functionality, say a web shop or an LMS. But sometimes the customer becomes very successful in the business, and the site grows, and the demand grows, and so they need something more bespoke. So they migrate the site off our platform to another hosting company where they have an individual instance, and they can dedicate a team to it. So it's often a way of attracting more customers in a predictable way, gaining additional recurring revenue on the front end, and then upselling projects on the back end. And I think that's the coolest use case that I see on the platform. And fortunately, that's, like I said, 80% of the time. But again, we have those large companies that come in and just already have this complete product-led mindset adopted, and they go, they launch, and they scale.
I get that. What is the cost? Do you charge in like buckets? So like 10 instances is say $500, or do you charge by the install? Like how do you charge?
Rob, it's I never expected this to be my favorite subject.
Yeah,
But it has become my favorite. But it's so hard
I
to
know.
price products, which is why it's my favorite subject, because it's the subject where I need to learn the most still.
Yeah.
And it's also like, if you're talking product market fit, in my experience, it's the price that still needs most optimization before you actually can say that you've reached product market fit, because our product, I believe strongly in, and is perfect for the ecosystem. But
Mhm.
how do you make it accessible by having certain price points and certain products that have a certain price? And so when we launched the platform, we introduced a lot of new concepts, right? So I talked about the versioning system. I talked how we call websites tenants. And then there's this thing called snapshots, which is basically a template, but you make a snapshot of a version, and then that snapshot is used to create new tenants. And we have an API, which for some is also something that's new and they need to learn. So there's a lot going on. And we help you, get used to that, and we help you get started. But we wanted to keep the pricing simple at least. So initially, when we launched the platform, we said all sites are $15 per month, but we charge by the hour, because we want to encourage people to spin up new sites so that they can test features.
Okay.
So if you delete it after an hour, you only pay for the hour. And that really helped us get started and get going. But then
That
we
is
realized, yeah, but
that's
then,
so interesting.
yeah, but still, I mean, it did. We realized that it was sometimes a bit overkill for people. Like, not everybody needs all the bells and whistles and needs
Yeah.
all the performance and all the scalability. They want something that's, more accessible. And obviously we came up with a price point that, you're a startup, so you're not charging the world for a site, and it's highly competitive still with other solutions in terms of the price per site. So we needed to find a way to make the platform more accessible, while not cutting into any profit margin we would have in the future. So we actually started stripping down the product. So at the time, we were offering one container that we choose for you, and then we scale your sites. And so now we came up with a new pricing model where you can actually choose from 3 containers, and you can also choose a scalability plan on three levels. And then also you can actually skip the scalability plans and go for metered instead. And metered means that you get to decide the minimum number of containers and the maximum number of containers that we can scale to at any point in time. So if your websites are really busy, we'll scale up. But if everybody's asleep, we'll scale down. And so our lowest price point now is, I believe, $4 per site.
Yeah.
And it can go up to $40 if you want to. And so now we've become much more accessible for people to get started with and to scale as they grow. So like I said,
I have a use case for you as we talk about this. It's interesting. So if you're an e-commerce site and you get busy in September and November and December because Christmas is coming, wouldn't it be feasible to get on a variable plan with you guys? And then you can scale up as the traffic goes and then scale down as the traffic comes up. Isn't that a good use case when you think about it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And interestingly enough, that's not a use case that I would predict going in. And that's also why we are very surprised by how people are using the platform, because we just implemented basic best practices from SaaS into WordPress, and now you come up with a use case that is actually suitable.
Yeah, I get that. That's really cool. How many clients do you have on your service right now, approximately? What would you bet?
I don't keep track because you go nuts if you do. But I believe it's a couple thousand. I could have a look. Now I go nuts. Yeah, so it's in the range of a couple thousand.
So it's in that range. Then that's not bad. That's growing then.
It is actually growing quite rapidly. I want to know how fast we are growing on a month-by-month basis, because the KPIs that we track are different. We look mostly at conversions by funnel phase. And also because our biggest growth comes not from the total number of users, but from the number of sites that a single
of course,
user
that's your growth. Yeah. So
that's why
if you have one user that has 50 sites and grows to 60, there's growth, right? So.
Exactly. So that's why I can tell you in one breath how many tenants per user we have, but I'm not overly interested in how many users we have at this point.
Yeah. This has been like such a real interesting conversation about your product and about the whole investment startup side. I mean, it's kind of a multifold conversation. I think you guys have done a really good job, Roger, and kudos to you, your co-founders, and your team for what you built.
Thanks. I regret that we don't get to see each other in Athens next week. I really enjoyed the conversation.
I did too, and I'm sure we'll have many more of them. If somebody wants to get a hold of you and talk about your product or anything else, WordPress, how's the best way?
Yeah, good question. I think I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. So you can just Google my name and probably my LinkedIn will pop up immediately. But really, Twitter, LinkedIn, my handle is Roger Rosweide. So that's quite easy.
No Blue Sky yet for you, I take it.
No, I'm discovering it. I'm researching.
Yes. Thanks, Roger. Have an amazing day and good luck to you and your team, and enjoy WordCamp Europe.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Stunning Digital Marketing, the digital marketing agency for all your business needs. We are also your WordPress security experts, having over 14 years of experience locking down, backing up, and protecting WordPress websites. Go to stunningdigitalmarketing.com for more info.
A very special thank you to Roger for joining me on this edition
for
of
links
the
to
SDM
everywhere
show.
we can be found on the web. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. I love you, and I think about you every day. For more information about Stunning Digital Marketing, your digital marketing experts, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.com or go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info to find out all the great places that Rob Cairns can be found on the web.